Meta just shut down the metaverse after spending $80 billion building it and changing their name from Facebook to Meta. Yes, both of those actually happened because in 2021, people paid $250,000 to have a digital land plot near Snoop Dogg. NFTs were running around and we were supposed to be using them in the metaverse for team meetings, for businesses, and even supposedly finding our future spouses. So 5 years later and $80 billion burned, Meta is deciding to move on from the metaverse. But it's quite obvious looking back at it as to why the metaverse didn't work, and I'm going to explain it. But not just explain it, what if I told you that Mark Zuckerberg actually wasn't wrong? So here's the full breakdown of the delusional world that was the metaverse. We're pouring 80 billion with a B, dollars into this long-standing project of building the metaverse, a place where people were supposed to be spending their time in virtual worlds. Two things to take away from this to start is one, I think Mark Zuckerberg is probably one of the most ambitious individuals on the planet because he will consistently throw absurd amounts of money at large risky bets for a chance to see Meta stock and Meta ascend to new heights. And the metaverse was one of those. But I think that one of the biggest problems Mark Zuckerberg and many others have is they don't actually understand what the metaverse is because we've been living in the metaverse all this time. The article says Meta is shutting down Horizon Worlds, right? And Horizon Worlds is like one of the VR metaverses that Meta has been, building out. I think it was they bought the Oculus, right? So they bought the Quest. They have the Quest, which was this VR headset, and that goes with this whole VR world. And people were supposed to be doing things in VR, right? But there are a couple of assumptions that we don't understand. Or not, we don't understand. There are a couple of things that I think Mark didn't understand or did not realize when he was dumping all of the money into the metaverse. And I'm going to break them down in a small series that I call Why the Metaverse Didn't Work. You spend $80 billion and you look up and Meta no longer cares about the metaverse, even though they changed their name on the US stock exchange from Facebook to legit Meta, right? Like they did that whole thing. This isn't out of the ordinary for a company this size when you think about the money they have, right? So if we go look at Meta stock, and we look at like the 5 year, everything will make complete sense. And if you guys have some of you have already seen kind of the crypto landscape, but if we look at Meta stock, right, over the last probably 5 years, we're in 2026, this is 2021, the stock has seen major ups and downs, right? And if you look at the trends, if we look at the trends around these major ups and downs, probably 2019 to 2020 era, when the stock was kind of ascending up, was when we were at what would be considered the height of the metaverse or the buzzword, the metaverse. It's the same way people looked at NFTs or now AI in terms of a trend sticks in Silicon Valley, a trend sticks in the wider zeitgeist of where money should be invested. And ultimately what happens is people decide we're going to put our money behind various different concepts and hope they pan out into something. So Meta stock was trending upward. Around November of 2021 is when everything started going down. But when we talk about the metaverse wasn't just Meta's branch of the internet, right? Their game, their VR headset. There were tons of companies doing metaverse stuff. You had Decentraland, which was this was like a crypto metaverse. And I think they're still around, where in this metaverse, people were legitimately buying like land plots. They were spending tens of thousands of dollars on NFT land. You could buy NFT land, right? Like you could buy this land and use the land to host parties and events. And the assumption was that we were all supposed to be doing things in the metaverse. Businesses would run their meetings in the metaverse in some sort of virtual world, but legit, you could buy virtual land. You had NFT lands. I mean, Axie Infinity, all these crypto companies had their very own metaverses. And at one point, I got to put in Grok and see if Grok could actually find it. Grok, can you find the tweet where back in 2021, the metaverse NFT land companies were advertising that you could own land near Snoop Dogg or owned NFT land near other major establishments like Lacoste or major brands? Let's see if Grok can find it. But back in 2021, these metaverse companies would advertise that you could own NFT land near Snoop Dogg, right? Like you could own your own parcel of land, and people were spending tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars on these sorts of like land metaverse properties. So Meta wasn't the only person doing the metaverse at this time. The problem that all of these metaverse people have, the metaverse just didn't work. It didn't work for a couple of reasons, and I'm going to break each of those down. The first and foremost reason why the metaverse didn't work is because we were never not in the metaverse. We're already in the metaverse. What I mean by we're already in the metaverse and we've already been in the metaverse is the metaverse isn't some 3D world that people are going to exist in. People are going to go on dates and people are going to spend the majority of their time on. The metaverse is actually the digital apps you use on a regular basis. Scrolling through X and building a platform on X and building a following on these different platforms, right? So like you have X, you have Instagram, you have TikTok. The social media apps have already been the metaverse. So when you talk about Mark Zuckerberg spending $80 billion to create what he thought was going to be the metaverse, Facebook in itself as a app was already the metaverse. The first foremost thing that everyone got wrong is thinking that the metaverse is not some sort of 3D world. 3D does not equal metaverse. The metaverse wasn't a 3D world. It can be a 3D world, meaning like people can use it as such, but what the metaverse probably has been, and it's the reason why no one calls it the metaverse, is the metaverse has just been where we've all just done anything. It's social media. Right now, if you're watching the stream, we're in the metaverse. You're talking to me over a digital medium that allows us to talk in real time and have these types of conversations. So what are you spending $80 billion on and doing all of this investment if we're already in the metaverse, right? The second thing that Zuckerberg and so many others got wrong with this whole metaverse concept is hype versus reality. The hype thesis is this, right? If we're talking hype thesis, the hype thesis would be, we believe that people will own digital land and spend significant amounts of their time walking around digital land and using these activations. This is kind of the thesis of the metaverse. This idea that like you would want to spend your time in a digital VR world, and people will want to spend more time in this digital VR world than like actually being outside or spending their time in the real world. Well, the problem with hyping this up is like the metaverse itself as a construct could be anything from Fortnite to Roblox to scrolling TikTok for various amounts of hours. So when you're hyping it up and being like, oh, you can purchase the metaverse, right? Like what I showed you guys right here, where like they're legitimately selling land plots. You can purchase your own land plot. Why would I care? For the first thing, the hype is, oh, people will care about purchasing these land plots. People will want to be next to Snoop Dogg. Get your piece of metaverse. Here's an exact tweet. You could buy an actual land plot next to Snoop Dogg. This is 2021. Get your piece of metaverse digital land next to Snoop Dogg, real Steve Aoki, and the real Sup Ducks. The account doesn't even exist for those guys. Who gives a damn? Like, why would I want to just own a land plot? Like the idea and the hype construct around digital land being as valuable as physical land, when digital land only exists in a database and is completely not finite and is also not integral to resource creation like physical land on Earth. People were sipping Kool-Aid, man. We were drinking from the water hose of gasoline and I don't know, bath salts to believe that like it's actually important. Get your digital land next to Snoop Dogg and Steve Aoki. You could pay to have a land plot next to these guys, right? Like here's the parcels. They're probably not on that land anymore. And they probably didn't spend that much time there anyway. And this is the reason, the third reason why the metaverse didn't work. Like the Y Combinator construct of like making something people want, right? If you think about the metaverse, they didn't make something people want. No one was waking up and being like, man, I cannot wait to just spend my time walking around the metaverse and building my metaverse life with my metaverse family in some sort of digital created world. So what ends up happening, you create something that you think the world needs, and then the world doesn't actually need it. And you look up and there's no consumer psychology around spending actual time in the metaverse. And to be honest, a great example of like probably a prime indicator for Zuckerberg could have been how many people actually adopted VR headsets. But that's different than spending $80 billion and believing that the entire world or most of the world will spend time in the metaverse. And even the Apple Vision Pro, right? Like we look at the Apple Vision Pro, they've literally discontinued it. Like they don't even make this anymore. And it probably was one of the coolest VR headsets that ever came out. For most people, it almost became useless. But we all fell in love with this concept of, oh my God, the metaverse has to exist. When you add all of these things up, that is how you get to the point where you have an $80 billion mistake. I don't think they're ahead of their time as much as they are building something novel that like someone might see as a fun experience. But Naeem, if you think about the things you use in your life every day, a lot of the times it has less to do with whether or not something is like fun and more to do with whether or not something is integral. The reason why I use Whisper Flow, right? Like if I just start typing, Whisper Flow tracks my entire voice and I just press 2 buttons on my keyboard, right? And then it typed this whole blob right here. The reason why I use Whisper Flow is because I feel like it genuinely improves an area of my life 10 to 100x. The same thing with Claude Code, right? The reason why I use Claude Code, you feel like there is a significant improvement on your life. When I look at the metaverse and digital land, all of these things that are considered like luxuries that aren't really even luxuries, but more so just like a bet that went wrong. I wrap this up to say that doesn't mean that what Mark Zuckerberg did was wrong in terms of he was not wrong for taking a big bet. And this is where a lot of startup founders go wrong, right? When we look at Meta stock again, let me pull it back up. We're talking about a company with a $1.557 trillion market cap. And one thing Meta is doing right now, Meta's spending tons of money buying they bought Scale AI. Meta bought Scale AI for $14 billion, right? Like they spent a ridiculous amount of money buying Scale AI. They still are not one of the top performing models yet. So like Meta is trying to do the exact same thing they did with the metaverse, which is take $100 billion or more, which is like saying, Mark Zuckerberg is basically saying, hey, we're a $1 trillion company, a $1.5 trillion company. If I take 1 to 10% of our current market cap and I gamble it on the next big thing, 5 to 6 years ago, that was the metaverse or what he thought it was. Now it's AI. If the company's worth $1.5 trillion and he gambles $100 billion, right, on the idea that AI will be the next big thing, or maybe even 200 billion. If that 200 billion adds another 2 to 5 trillion to Meta's net worth, that was a bet worth taking. You're playing with so much capital that the only way you can truly continuing to grow at such a pace is by taking well-assessed risk. I think in 2021, crypto was going crazy and the whole theme of the metaverse created this euphoric approach where like that was the risk worth taking. Now, when we're in a stage where as a startup founder, right, and Zuck, for all intents and purposes, they've IPO'd, but he still runs the high level of how Meta makes major decisions as a startup. The idea that if the goal is to increase stock price and make Meta the biggest company in the world, which is the reason why he didn't sell it in the first place when he had multiple offers before they became what they are today, you have to take educated risk to catch bigger players. Bigger players might be YouTube and Google, or maybe it's OpenAI, ChatGPT, maybe it's any of these companies, right? Even though the metaverse failed and he said, okay, we fucked off $80 billion. What's next? What's next is you say, okay, that didn't work, but we have so much revenue and so much of a market cap. We're going to now take $100 billion and go build a foundational lab to create one of the next great foundational models alongside ChatGPT and Claude and all of these other competitors, because what other choice does he have? When you own such an important piece of data that is Facebook, regardless of if you use it or not, or if I use it, it has a ridiculous amount of data. What ends up happening, right, is even though this wasn't a risk that paid off, he has to keep taking risks. And when you're a company of that side, risk is good. And even though it was an educated risk that failed, Zuckerberg did exactly what he should have been doing as a CEO. You continue to take educated risk to make your company 3, 5, 10x bigger. Because when you don't, you end up like companies that were giants in the past. Look at what happened to Blockbuster. They were the biggest in movies and they got eaten by Netflix, and then they just completely fizzled out because they stopped taking risk. That doesn't mean everything has to live on the edge of risk, but if you're truly trying to build something generational and you don't want to look like the next dinosaur, you have to take those type of risks. I think it's actually a W that Mark realized it's not working and he shut down the metaverse.